How about that? We made it through another week. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live edition of the Green Rush. It's how we end the week at Pro Cannabis Media TV. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm always joined on Fridays by
David Rabinovitz.
That would be him, and this would be me. And on the third Friday of every month, we welcome in our friend from Washington, D.C., Morgan Fox from the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us again on this Friday.
Thanks for having me.
So what's the latest? What's going on? I understand that I heard a rumor that all Republicans and all Democrats actually voted for cannabis. Oh, no. It wasn't for cannabis. They actually identified Juneteenth as a federal holiday. I got excited there for a minute. Needless to say, I am the eternal optimist. I'm hoping that this is the beginning of both sides actually coming together and working together. Am I a little naive, Morgan?
Well, I mean, I think that it's fantastic that they were able to, really put a lot more attention on the Juneteenth holiday and make it official. Unfortunately, they still can't get together to protect voting rights. So I think that we have to be a little bit skeptical about what sort of cooperation we're going to see between the two major parties. But, I think that there's definitely some room for cooperation, particularly when it comes to cannabis issues. And I think this is becoming more and more clear as more and more states are passing these bills. And I'm sure you all saw that there's a legalization bill heading to the Connecticut governor's desk right now. So that's a few more lawmakers on board.
Now, let me ask you a question on the official count of legal states. Okay. And I understand it is South Dakota that has the asterisk by it. Okay. Is this the 18th or the 19th state to about to become legal, Connecticut? What's the official count, Morgan?
Well, considering that the South Dakota asterisk situation is still in play, and we're eagerly awaiting what the state Supreme Court has to say about that, I think that it's accurate to say that 19 states have passed cannabis law or adult use laws, but when you're talking about ones that are actually headed towards enactment or have already been enacted, I think it's 18 is probably safer, at least for now. But again, fingers crossed.
That's right. And, I think the eternal optimist in me always comes out and, I'm big on rounding up anyway. To me, we're at 20 states, right? Because DC should be a state. Just saying. Okay. Right. Anyway, that's what I'm saying. David, I don't want to hog the microphone. I'd like you to chime in here. And I know you've got something to ask Morgan about. But
Go ahead, Jimmy. Keep going.
I talked to a friend of mine who said he loves the banter between the two of us and how I keep throwing you under the. I'm not throwing you under the bus. I'm just trying to give you an opportunity.
Jimmy, you want to see the tire tracks in the back of me? I can't even get them out of I put them in through. I use Tide. I use Shout. I use everything. I can't get the tire tracks off the back of my shirt.
A Tide stick works really well.
I'm just going to get my hair cut in like a tire tread right over it.
All right. I'll ask the questions. You just provide the commentary and comedy, I guess. It's fine. I have no problem with that. Okay. Morgan, I heard a rumor or part of a story. There seems to be some reporting going on that the eagerly anticipated federal bill sponsored by Senator Cory Booker and Senator Schumer from New York are both ready to rock in July. Have you heard anything about that, or this doesn't surprise you that this is now starting to perhaps gain some momentum?
Well, I can't completely confirm it, but it would make sense. I mean, this bill, I'm very glad that they took their time and have been putting so much work into it and have been engaging with stakeholders. We still haven't seen the language of that, and I'm not sure anybody else has either. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But, the clock is starting to tick a little bit if the Senate wants to start addressing this issue before everybody has to leave for campaigning early next year. And considering how many other issues are at play, I think that there's going to be a lot of things vying for attention in both chambers. And, we need to get moving on this legislation as quickly as possible.
Does leverage of that time actually get the two sides to actually feel like there's some urgency, or they're just, reading between the lines of what's going on in the Republican Party right now, they aren't very cooperative, let's say?
I think the Democrats have a little bit more urgency on this issue, particularly because it tends to help them a little bit more. But also, if I were them, I'd be very worried about losing control of the House and Senate in the midterms. And so that really shortens the window for Congress to be able to get anything done. And as we've seen, Democrats are much more strongly in favor of uh, cannabis policy reform than Republicans. Although, as I said, Republican support, especially for incremental changes like the Safe Banking Act, has been growing steadily, and could very well exist in the amount that we need to actually get some of these things passed this year.
I will say there's been more attention on calendar dates and the significance of 50 years after President Richard Nixon decides to declare war on drugs with his Controlled Substances Act and making cannabis a Schedule I drug with no medicinal value. And then on the same day, a couple of congressmen and the House decide they would actually introduce something that would be basically legalizing all drugs and putting everything under the health and safety and taking it away from any kind of a commission and putting it back onto underneath the health world of the federal government. To me, that was window dressing. It was symbolic more than anything else. Is that how that was viewed?
I think so. And I mean, also, you have to think that just because the federal government, or if the federal government did pass a law like that, all these substances would still be illegal at the state level for the most part, with just a couple of exceptions. Now, admittedly, those exceptions are starting to grow in number, particularly if you're looking at it at the local level. And, just for the record, NCIA doesn't have any position on substances other than cannabis. I mean, I think that it's fair to say that we're a harm reductionist and anti-prohibition organization. But, I think that you're absolutely right. It's very much a symbolic gesture to bring more attention to the failures and harm caused by the war on drugs. And the more people are talking about this issue, the more it helps general harm reduction policies get put into place. But it definitely, really accelerates things with cannabis too, just because of the comparative safety compared to other substances of cannabis. And it really makes it a no-brainer.
You actually touched on something that I've written a blog about, and I'm sure it's not a very popular opinion piece that I've done on it, but I kind of support exactly what you said, that can't we just take care of one issue, cannabis first, before we move on to psilocybin and all these other plant medicines that are out there? Is that kind of how the industry, how you guys feel, or the whole industry? I think that, battle one thing, get one win before you move on to the next one. Personally, my opinion.
Well, like I said, NCIA doesn't really have a position on that, but I can tell you personally that I don't think these efforts are mutually exclusive, and I don't think that working on issues of removing prohibition or lessening penalties for drugs other than cannabis has a negative impact on the momentum of cannabis policy reform. And I mean, there may be some merit to justification to wanting to wait for policies like that, but tell that to the people that are getting arrested and going to jail every day.
Right. That is a great point. David, you got anything yet? Ask your dogs. They usually have more to say sometimes than you do.
You want me to go bring them in, Jimmy?
I don't.
We can really light up the sound.
I was just putting more treads on your back, I guess, on that. I know I was going to ask you something before I got off onto the psychedelics thing. But I know why. We're talking about cultivation on this show. We've got a whole bunch of growers. We've got some cultivators and some growers and people from Humboldt County and people that are local farmers in Massachusetts, CBD manufacturers. We're talking about cultivation, home grow as a political issue on that federal agenda. What role does that play? Or do you think that every state should have its own opportunity to make rules about actually growing your own medicine at home?
Well, we absolutely support home cultivation, and I think it should be legal everywhere and federally protected. If states want to tweak exactly how they do that, with things like plant counts or location rules and things like that, I think that could probably be left up to the states, just as long as we're not seeing total prohibition of it. And I think that home cultivation, aside from it being the right thing to do, and we don't want to criminalize cannabis behavior, particularly for people that are largely doing it because they might have limited income and are patients and actually need to be able to grow their own medicine and be able to know exactly where it's coming from. But these programs act as a micro incubator for the cannabis industry. It allows people to develop skills and products in a relatively low cost manner that can then be applied in the legal industry and really just helps bring more attention to it. Very much the same way that home brewing has really caused the craft brewing industry to explode in a good way. I think it just generates more interest in the product. It generates innovation at all levels of the supply chain, and is absolutely something that should be protected. Every once in a while you'll hear an occasional business, and it's usually an MSO saying that home cultivation is too risky to be allowed, or is going to start taking money out of their bottom line. And we haven't seen anything to suggest that that's the case.
Right. Well, it's funny. It's not funny. There actually have been some incidences of people. People aren't the smartest when you get right down to it. And especially when it comes to an indoor grow. Where you're taxing the electrical panel in your house with these grow lights and what have you. I'm just wondering, will there ever be any kind of a incentive plan for people who are growing to use solar power, because that's a lot cleaner than electricity? And recently, Massachusetts, they came out with a report that 10% of the entire state's electricity is now being dedicated to growing cannabis indoors. And that's alarming to me, because I'm very conscious of the environment, but I'm also conscious of the challenges of bringing a product like cannabis to market like this. What's the feeling about protecting the environment? And is there a way, do you think, where the industry, usually pretty socially conscious, the people that are involved with cannabis, might want to do something that is more favorable to the environment?
Well, the energy usage issue is definitely top of mind for the industry and for our organization. I mean, it was one of the major sections of a recent paper on environmental sustainability that we released. And it's something that the industry is really going to have to address, either through things like incentives, like you mentioned, making sure to allow outdoor cultivation in states with legal regulated markets, and to encourage that in a responsible manner. We're also going to have public education campaigns taking place for home cultivators. But when it comes to energy usage, I don't think that the home cultivation market is really making that much of an impact. I could be wrong, but it seems to me that a small number of people growing small amounts of cannabis in their homes is not really going to be making the same amount of impact as 40,000 square foot canopy spaces of constantly running lights.
Right. Except for the idiots out there who will put in too many lights and too many plants because they're really clueless, and then they cause a fire. So again, that's one of those collateral damage stories that can happen with home grow. And it actually has happened. I know it has here in Massachusetts, and it is a concern of law enforcement and also fire people as well, because it just makes sense. But how do you cure stupidity, Morgan? Right?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that really doesn't happen all that often at all, and
Right.
I mean, probably happens a whole lot more often with people using power tools or welding equipment in their
Right.
homes.
David, do you have power tools in your home? Do you know how to use them? Do you ever use them? You're on mute. Go ahead.
Actually, pretty handy that way, Jimmy.
All right, that's cool. So, and I'm sure you're very careful, right?
Generally speaking.
Yeah, well, that's good, because that's important. I think, whenever you do anything with power around the house or what have you. Morgan, now that we're getting back to more normalcy, people are getting out, the masks are coming off, the vaccinations are going up, the death rate's coming down, COVID seems to be easing through a horrific year. When is the first NCIA in-person convention scheduled?
The first one is going to be the Midwest Cannabis Business Conference in Detroit on September 22nd and 23rd. Excuse me. And then the next two will both be in December. That's the Eastern Cannabis Business Conference in Baltimore and the Cannabis Business Summit in San Francisco. Unfortunately, I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but yeah, if you go to thecannabisindustry.org or cannabisbusinesssummit.com, you should be able to find all the details for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And the fall seems to be the safest time. That's when MJ BizCon is going to be back in business in October in Las Vegas. There's already, if you will, a buzz in the community about the pilgrimage to Las Vegas in the fall. That is the MJ BizCon. And I think the people are excited about that as well. One of the things that we talked about, Morgan, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I'm not sure you were part of this conversation or not, but what's going on in Mississippi, right? With 74% of the voters basically saying we want medicinal cannabis, and then the government basically coming in now, and there's a lawsuit and all this. You know what's going on there, correct?
Yeah, and that was already ruled on. So unfortunately, the ballot initiative was rejected, along with all of the other ballot initiatives not related to cannabis that were also passed by the voters of Mississippi in the last year, because of a bizarre little technicality where they have to have something like a certain percentage of 5 districts, and
there's only 4
districts in the state.
There's only 4. That's right. I
Totally
learned that.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I don't. I would hope that the legislature would listen to the voters and have some compassion and try to pass a bill that is identical to the one that the voters supported. I tend to doubt that's going to happen, considering that the ballot initiative process is usually a way to get around intransigent lawmakers, and it was viewed as necessary by the activists in that state, and the legislative pathways really didn't look great at all. There are things like programs that didn't have any real legal access, were only limited to terminally ill patients, things like that. So I'm very skeptical that the state legislature will actually get a halfway decent, comprehensive medical bill to the desk of the governor, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's a sad day when the voters vote and the political system uses itself to upend the actual democratic process. We talked with Dr. Dave Allen down there in Mississippi. He's an advocate trying to actually sue the court now, which I'm not quite sure how you do that, but I know that there are lawyers out there that will take anybody's money to fight anything. So that's okay. But anyway, Morgan, we are getting up close to our 4:20 time on Friday. You are always one of the most reliable guests that we have. And I just want to thank you again for being there for us on the 3rd Friday of every month on the Green Rush Live.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. There's Morgan Fox from the NCIA. It is getting close to our 4:20 time. And that, of course, is when we take our first break on this show. When we come back, we'll open up the panels for Cultivation. David, do you want to give a little preview on who's coming on our panel today?
Oh, we've got a great panel. I'd have to pull it up because I don't remember all the names off the top of my head. And we're at 421, Jimmy. And we cannot.
All right. I will not delay anymore. I will go to Shanty by Jonathan Edwards, our 420 on the East Coast, or at least my personal one here in New England. And with all due respect to the Waldos and the Grateful Dead, and 420 being adopted as the law enforcement call for public consumption of cannabis going on. So for now, we're going to take our first break. Enjoy your 420 break with Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. We'll be back with a full lineup of our Cultivation show, and David will know exactly who's going to be in the room when we come back.